Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar for Change with Iceni. Firstly, a huge congratulations to all those involved in the UK and Ireland Ultimate Frisbee Black Lives Matter fundraiser, who, as of this evening, have raised a spectacular 32,431.98p. My name is Grania, and I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists for this evening and our charities we are hoping to support through these conversations. We've got three in mind, and all details about how to donate will be in the description box below, as well as on all the Iceni social platforms. The first one is the Bay Tree Centre. It is a social inclusion charity for women and girls based in the heart of Brixton, an integral part of the community since 1991. They provide holistic support through personal activities and workshops, mentoring, coaching, as well as English classes and integration support for newly arrived migrants and refugees. Show Racism the Red Card, I'm sure you're all aware of already. They provide educational workshops, training sessions, multimedia packages, as a whole host of other resources, all with the purposes of tackling racism in society. And finally, we have the UKU Diversity and Inclusion Fund. This came about after the forum that was hosted in June. In order to tackle the issues brought up, the most immediate actions arising from the forum is that there will be a Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee, DEI for short, to help inform and lead our changes and projects. Donations to this fund will provide the DEI committee with a budget for some initial projects for our community. So really would appreciate anything you can help us with for the three charities mentioned. Everything you need to find out for donate is in the description box below, as well as on the Iceni platforms. And now on to our wonderful panelists. We have Fawzia. She is the founder of DC Fledge, is on the UKU Women's Committee and the UK Board of Directors. We also have Tatenda. They are from Sussex, first contracted Black coach in the UK, and has a strong background working with young people throughout the UK. So would really like to welcome you both to the conversation.
Hey everyone, really excited to be a part of this. Firstly, I'd just like to thank everyone involved, both within Iceni for putting this together and with the UK and Ireland Black Lives Matter initiatives. As a Black person, this summer's kind of been quite difficult with everything that's been going on. Don't need to focus too much on that, but seeing all of the work that's been going on, and not just lip service, but people actually reaching into their pockets and donating, it's actually given me a lot of hope and to continue the fight. So thank you to everyone involved.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm going to leave now and give it all over to our wonderful panelists. We'll have a small break to talk a bit more in the end for any questions. But yeah, leave it over to you guys. Thank you again for your input, and I hope everyone who is watching, please donate, please have a conversation, and we look forward to hearing from you as these go forward.
Hi, thank you for that, Grania. That was a really nice introduction, and just want to echo Tatenda's sentiments. This is really exciting, and today we're going to be talking about how the ultimate community can invest in diversity in the long term to kick off these sessions. So just to recap what's been going on. So over the last few months, the world has been shaken and woken up about the injustices faced by the Black community, and is also a call to action and is fighting for equal treatment and opportunities. In turn, this conversation is questioning a lot of the effects of white supremacy and why people of color are so often underrepresented in politics, education, business, and for us, sport. So since climbing up the ultimate ladder myself, I've questioned the representation in our sport for a while now. And it's given me the opportunity for not only me, but others in the community to speak up and do something about it at this time and have a lasting legacy for everyone that is going to play later on. So I've had many conversations over the last few months. I held the forum with people of color about how diversity is in our sport at the moment. how we feel about it, what can we do about it. And it's given me the chance to do a lot of reading and thinking about it in a more deeper way. I think I've read more about Black Lives Matter and diversity than I did for like my entire university degree. And it's really exciting because it has already led to some kind of a change. As Granny said, we've already got this DEI committee coming up and running. But the ideas of what UKU can do involves a lot of time and, more importantly, money. So we already have a campaign, for those of you that don't know, called Reset the Stall, which is just to keep UKU afloat. And if we think about that, we already need money for that. That means that there's not much else, including the efforts that we want to put forward with diversity and inclusion. So while we have this committee, it's all great. And Deep Space putting through their BLM fundraiser was incredible. And they came to us and they were like, well, if we have money to put forward, why not help you guys out? And why not put out a fund and get more people to invest in Ultimate and in diversity in Ultimate? So it means that all of this money can actually ensure that projects are going forward within Ultimate, because it is really difficult for people to put forward their time when they might not have that much time, but actually having money there can make so much more of a difference. But we have to understand that putting money forward is a massive, massive privilege, and a privilege that not everyone has. So if you are able to do it, please do it. And if you're not able to do it, please understand that there are so many other things that you can do. And those that are financially privileged enough to give money, you also need to understand that while it's easy to throw money at a problem, you should also be reading and learning more about what's going on. Because having a community that is more educated and more anti-racist is really beneficial for us. The links on the side with donations that you can put forward to the great organizations Iceni have put forward. And so sort of moving on to the question of, well, what else can we do that doesn't involve money? So there's so many great websites out there. There's so many great areas of reading. The one resource that I've been loving is this website called Play by the Rules, which is Australian. And I'm just going to summarize what they have because I think it's super useful within our context. And they've dealt with a lot of clubs, especially youth clubs. We're going to talk about youth later on and how we can really make sure that we're talking about diversity on all levels and including everyone. So with the Play by the Rules, so they have a lot of findings. They've done a lot of research already, and they found that a lot of clubs recognize the benefits of diversity, but feel under-resourced to promote and support diversity. And it's often seen as a periphery to their core business. Also, the commitment to diversity is usually dependent on one individual champion driving the change rather than something that is institutionalized within club culture. So for me personally, those who know me from DC, formerly known as Disky Chicks, if I feel like I put in a lot of work to it, and I feel like if I'm not there, who carries that on? Who carries on that legacy? It's not everyone doing it, it's one person. And that's so often true with many ultimate clubs. It's why many ultimate clubs fold, because there's one person championing it rather than having it institutionalized within the entire club culture to bring it up. And it's the same with diversity. We need to make sure that it's within the club culture rather than one person just championing it. And if there are those champions, you have to make sure that you are finding them and promoting them and making sure that you're supporting them so that they can do the work, and that if they do leave, that their legacy is still being held up. There's very little attention to intersectionality. So I've done a lot of work with Women's Ultimate and even like women's charities and women's studies in my professional life. And intersectionality is so, so important, because a lot of the time we're looking at one aspect, but we're not realizing that there's so many other things that are coming into play. So for example, gender and race. is a huge crossover. If you look through any of the findings from Sporting Equals, you'll see that even though there aren't many people of color playing sports, there are much less women playing than male players of colors. So we need to make sure that we're looking through all of these different things. There's disability, there's sexuality, there's so many things that come into play together that we need to be looking at. And that's one of the reasons why we've decided with Diversity, Inclusivity Committee to make sure that we are looking at all of these aspects and how they're working together. The other thing that they found was that clubs support a participation ethos, where more supportive of diversity communities, where clubs that are more supportive of diversity communities compared to those that value performance think that they are not able to coexist. So that participation won't perform as well. And all of that is completely unfounded. They can totally coexist. You can have diversity within your clubs. I think Color of Ultimate in the US are a great showing of this, that you can have great players of color within your club and that they can have really high performances. The other thing that they found was that the high performing best players were the culture setters. So they were the key drivers towards upholding greater diversity in club culture due to their status. And that's a great point to put into play, especially, so in London, there's a lot of like cliquiness. There's a lot of these best players within clubs. There's, what are the best players doing? Let's follow them. If you know you're one of those best players, understand it and use that to do good, because you can really set the culture of your club and show it to other players. I think with all of this, it's so important to just start these conversations within your clubs. It's so difficult to do, and even if you do it with a few people of your club that can bring everyone in, it's the first step. You need to identify what your culture is within your club, and you need to understand what diversity and inclusivity actually means. Different clubs will engage in different ways, and they might not be able to do everything, but even starting with small steps and understanding what you can do is really, really important. So that's sort of it from that wider diversity side. The other thing that we've spoken about a lot in these conversations are that diversity often starts at the youth level. So making sure that we have diversity at the junior level and at the youth level will only push that up and bring that up. And that's one of the best ways to do it. So I'm going to pass it on to Tatenda now, who can speak more about that.
Yeah, just going on from, especially in your point of intersectionality. Intersectionality isn't just about race, isn't just gender, but also age is an intersect as well. And in my brain, it just makes sense. You know, if you have younger people starting Ultimate at an early age, you know, it benefits everyone, the entire community, long term, from a number of purposes. Firstly, I know most people, myself included in this country, start Ultimate at university. You know, I did at Sussex in 2015. And that is also a privilege. Just being a university student is a privilege. And then also having the capacity to be a student athlete, both in terms of being able to afford memberships to your student unions, being able to invest however many hours of training, your weekends, training and playing Ultimate Frisbee instead of maybe taking on a part-time job just to pay your rent. You know, that's also a privilege. But if you got Ultimate into schools, or coming from the perspective of a university student, then it gets into the demographics of who's going to universities, and the socio-economic factors that play into that. And also then there's potentially, even if we're going into schools as opposed to just universities, gets rid of a typical sort of white savior complex, whether you have university students at stools trying to go talk to certain people, but then why, as if we're a community made up of predominantly white people, who are you going up to and why? Even outside of the university setting, out in the real world, let's say, which groups are you targeting to? We all agree that the sport is brilliant for multiple reasons. It's why we're such a great community. You know, we found something that we're invested into and want to bring other people in, and that's fantastic, you know, to keep growing the sport. Then you have to question yourself as to who are you targeting and why, and what are the intentions behind it. And not even just intentions, you could be well intentioned, but it's weird optics to, you know, target certain people for certain reasons. But a great way to avoid all of that is going into schools. You know, schools. There is still differences between people and their experiences in schools, whether you're coming from a single family background compared to a family where you've got both parents within the household, and every child's story is different within the school. But if you're in that school setting, that it's almost diversity by proxy. It's, you're not going to the school because, oh, the school's diverse. You're going to the school because, oh, this is where all of the children are. And it just so happens, especially in areas like London, areas of the UK, that there's a lot of diverse schools around. So you're not going to the schools for diversity, but diversity is a byproduct of going into the schools. And that does come with some challenges, you know, for pretty much all of us. Ultimate is secondary to primary professions studies, so people might not have the time, resources, capacity to be able to, during school hours, go into schools. They might not like children, which is fair enough. I've got a background in working with children. I love kids, but I understand that can be very difficult, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, which is also, yes, another challenge. But even things like a DBS check, of course, necessary, but then that's, again, more costs, more time, more resources that need to be put in. But from my perspective, the benefits of doing that massively outweigh any of those barriers, even though those barriers do exist. And then we want to talk about ways in which we can do more with what we already have. I know within the Ultimate community, there's a lot of teachers. I've played with a lot of people who've gone on to become teachers. Maybe it's about trying to invigorate those already working with children, or even social workers already working with children, to bring in Ultimate into part of what they're already doing. And I know UKU are already doing actually quite a lot. I think Fowzia has some statistics on what UKU are doing with schools currently.
Yeah, so I think, so there's a blog that's been recently published by Sahil, and what's impressive to me, and I think a lot of people don't realize how many players there are currently at school level, and we can really tap into that. Like Tatenda said, it's very, very difficult to actually go into schools and introduce the sport by yourself, but that work's already been done. So what is our next step? So for example, here's some quick statistics, is that there's 162 affiliated schools. So it's free for a school to become affiliated. However, there are, and this is in 2018-19, there are 781 schools that have reported Ultimate as an activity part of their provision, which means that there's 3,736 young people who participated in inter-school competitions, and it shows that there's a close to 50-50 gender split. So already, just based on those figures, like Tatenda saying, targeting school level, schools are already diverse most of the time. So already targeting that's already been done. So what are we doing from that? Where are those 3,700 players? What are we doing to make sure that they stay playing and we are giving them the opportunity to play?
Yeah, and that can then even be going on to what clubs are doing. Maybe it's then progressing the conversation to having junior practices, as opposed to a club predominantly just being maybe a team and a practice squad, which is really just a team, a club actually being a club, with multiple ages. So you might have your senior team, and then you've got your under 16s, under whatever. But actually, then that's paving the way for the next generation of schools. So that's outside of the school environment. Okay, the children might be introduced to the sport at school, and if they take a fancy to it, take a liking to it, then it's then about providing opportunities outside of that school environment. And if we already have an existing club structure within the UK, it's about integrating those young people within the existing already club structures. And that's where you can deepen those foundations. And even outside of the importance of going into schools and that youth work, I want to talk about spirit of the game, one of the pillars of our sport, how the importance of that to the development of young people. I know myself, I'm still young myself, but my development in the past 5 years, just as a human being, first and foremost, has been greatly influenced by spirit of the game. Now, I went to university as a toxic little, a little toxic little so-and-so, and actually by discovering the sport and trying to adhere, because I'm deeply competitive myself, so I want to both come first, but also I want to win spirit as well. Spirit's something you can win, but it's a value system. Let me try and adhere to this as best as I can. Maybe my intentions might be a bit conceited, if you wish, but the development of that on my own personal life has really just showed me it's okay. There is a different way to approach sports, a different way to approach interactions with your fellow person, which in the times we're in now, I think is deeply, deeply important. And even works which I've done within schools and even outside of the school, in collaboration with Surrey Youth Ultimate, I think 2018, was at a festival called Go Fest, which is a festival of sports marketed towards families. So the way this festival would work would be a family would buy a ticket, and they would go, and there would be, I think there was over 50 sports, dances, activities that they could go try in hour or so workshops. So I spent a Saturday and a Sunday, every hour, 2 or 3 new families coming and trying the sport. And the feedback which we're getting is the spirit of the game aspect really, really resonated well. And even my sister, she's a teacher, and to explain to her about spirit of the game, it's the values of the sport, which I think are extremely important. And I think if we can instill those values within young people, I just think it's better for the development of future generations. Now, I often even just think about who I would have been had I discovered the sport and spirit of the game at age 12 or 13 as opposed to at age 19, And then also it comes in with the family values. Of course, everything we're talking about now is potentially idealistic, and we have to deal with the scenario of the pandemic, which we're in now, and COVID, it's permeated every level of society, just the way you even interact with someone compared to events. And there's so many more considerations we have to think about now than we never had to think about before. But even if we're thinking about from the family aspect, I know we have some ultimate families throughout, parents started to have children who go on to be prodigies, if you so will. But even if we're thinking from a health perspective and trying to minimize contacts and even that tracing, if we have a family of players, maybe the kids start at school, bring their parents along to a club because the club has a juniors and a full adult team. They come together. That's one household, one family unit. Maybe we talk, the idea of the nuclear family doesn't really exist too much more, but there are still households. We have one household of 4 people coming to training as opposed to a household of 3 or 4 different people with 1 people each going to that one training. It just even helps from that perspective. So it works on a multitude of layers, the importance of getting youth involved with Ultimate.
No, I completely agree, and that's a great way to look at it, especially within this current climate. Making sure that we are, so sort of going back to the thing that you said about like the age within the diversity, we're looking at the youth, but we need to make sure that their parents are there for a lot of it if they are quite young. And that's just two more players or one more player at least, which is a huge way to get them involved. So I think that's a really fun thing. And even if it's something like throwing or a game of mini at the moment, how many players do you need for that? Not many. And that's a great way to get more people involved. If you know any families, if you can reach out to anyone, if you go to the park, like there's so many times where people want to do something, but they're too scared to ask. Go up to everyone around and be like, do you want to throw around with us? It's not that hard, but you need to make that first step within the whole club thing and making sure that you're reaching out to these schools and these participants of these schools. Going together as a club just looks really professional, and it's something like, if I'm thinking of myself as a kid, that's a really cool thing to have these adults that are sporty and athletic actually interested in you. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I joined Ultimate in the first place, because I wasn't athletic and I loved the fact that they just wanted to get players interested and they were investing so much time in you. If you're doing that for kids that are much younger, it leaves a huge impact, and making sure that the parents also know about this whole spirit of the game aspect is really important, and sort of helps that build that trust between you as an Ultimate player and as the Ultimate community and these young people.
The thing you'd like to talk about is touching to do with diversity, but also then our ultimate community, ways in which maybe not just with our resources, donating to charities, but it's well known that, especially if trying to go into professional careers, it's more about who you know rather than what you know. I was recently at a wedding. It was my sister's wedding, actually, and I was talking to a family friend from Zimbabwe, first generation immigrants, and telling me the story that she did a law degree, trained to be a lawyer, was unemployed for about 2 years, trying to find just her foot in the door, and now actually ended up going back to university to do social work because couldn't find any law opportunities. And she said to me that everyone she studied with who are now actually working within law, practicing, all got their opportunity through a family friend or knowing someone. And when you come as an immigrant to this country, you don't have those deep-rooted connections with people. You don't have, your grandparents know these people from over here, so your parents know these people over here. You don't have that network. There could be actually ways in which we use our privilege. If we are, most of us start at university and then go on to lead professional careers and in all different types of field, could actually be rallying around as a community and say, hey, I'm someone who works in a law firm, have the power not the power, but I can see if there's an internship opportunity or some type of thing, using the privilege of the privilege of the community to benefit those who might not have that privilege in other aspects of their life. So it's actually almost seeing the ultimate community as a net, if you will, and think if we can get young people within the sport, it's getting young people interacting with professional older people, but based upon the combined love of the sport, not just seeing someone as to what I can get from you, but it's, hey, we're connected because we both love this sport, and that means I care about you as a person, and you're looking to do something in this field which I happen to be doing. Let's see if I can help you out. That's a way of the ultimate community uplifting people, not just throwing money at a problem, not just, say, okay, I donated, pat on the back, or, I can't donate, but I shouted out that there's something going on. If you have access for opportunities, because more often than not, it's about climbing the ladder. It's about finding opportunities in places. And if you have the ability to help facilitate that, that is another way in which you're uplifting people within the ultimate community, because ultimately we're still in a place where it's not feasible that ultimate should be your full-time job, so it's maybe one day that would be the dream and the vision, but thinking, okay, what are the practical things we can do to help people within our community now? If you are in the position to be able to do something like that, then that's something you can do. And of course, I'm not trying to say you should put yourself in jeopardy, bend over backwards, something you can't do. If you can't do it, you can't do it. But if you can do it, maybe it's something you hadn't thought of before. Right? And then final thing about the importance of getting ultimate to younger people, from my perspective, I already said deeply competitive person. And just think about the effect getting more young people playing ultimate would have on GB national teams, both juniors and then ergo senior teams down the line, both from a perspective of having a larger player base to choose from. If you've got more candidates of people playing, okay, we all know about air badges, but then probably some other pockets here and there. But if you just have a larger player base, it's going to become more competitive, get the best candidates representing national teams. But then also, secondarily from that, if you get more people playing the sport at a younger age, they will have a more developed skill set moving forward. So let's talk about the last major world tournament, or World WIFTF tournament, was under 24s last year in Heidelberg. Most of the GB teams would have been comprised of players maybe started at university, 18, 19, with a 3 or 4 year ultimate skill set, if you will. What about if you've been playing since you were 12? Under 24s, that's a 10-year ultimate skill set. And then think about how that could then reflect upon the results. Right? And that's, for me, that it makes sense. If you want to be most committed, even if you look around the world, okay, you've got America, it's like a monolith, and the sport started there, and they've got a large population to begin with, and then it's every year, so it might be a bit unfair to compare and contrast with there. But if you look at Italy, and the system within Bologna, both at the top level, they've got both European championships and both the Open and the women's division. But then if you look deeper into the Italian under 24s, the Italian under 17, they're both in the finals of the European championships, European junior championships. But then you look at the UK, historically we've had the success of Clapham and Iceni, at the top. But if you look what is underneath them within the results, it's telling a very different story, because we don't have those pathways into those top teams. It's, instead of a structured developmental pathway up through the ranks, it's, you're good, you want to play at the highest level, people congregate to London for work anyway, they just come to the top. So it's almost a self-cannibalizing model, as opposed to opening the door for future generations.
No, that's a really great point. And I think when you talk about USA, saying that they have so many players and all of that, like I said, we do have that player base. We have a massive youth player base. So it is just looking at that next step. The thing is that they have such great junior programs and leagues. They have a lot of local leagues. And I think the more we talk about COVID and the effects of it, and the more we talk about actually getting people to play more with those leagues, you have an array of players. You have some players that are a bit more inexperienced, and you have some amazing players in those leagues as well. So talking about those connections that they're making, things like that is what sort of helps push these players up, and making sure that they do come in contact with these really incredibly skilled players and learning from them, and then in turn just strengthening the whole GB model through that. So it's something that we're probably looking more at with local leagues and local competitions, but it's something so important for everyone to participate in, because if you're leaving it to like, oh, if it's a local league, it's not going to be very good, I'm better than that, I'm not going to play. You removing yourself from that already leaves a big gap from people to learn from and to get in contact with. So I think that we have the opportunity to do that now, but we just need to come together and actually move forward with it once we can, obviously. But making sure that we're getting this massive wide player base at the bottom and making sure that they've got all of this experience behind them by the time they come to the top would just mean that it's a more competitive top.
Yeah, and from speaking, actually, there was something I was watching on YouTube the other day. I'm a bit of a digital native, addicted to YouTube, but I was watching this guy's called Bobby Kasanga, and is previously been incarcerated, but now changing his life, works out of London, started his own semi-professional football team. It's now all about, reformed and youth development and empowerment. And this isn't ultimate, but this is a different sport. Football, what he'd done is organised, it's called the 32 Boroughs Cup, getting a team just from each of the 32 boroughs, a youth team for the aged 16 to 18, a youth team, just one team, so 11 to 15 players from each of the 32 boroughs in London, organised to come together, play a tournament, but attached to that tournament, that cup, was then networking opportunities. That had local businesses coming, almost like a careers fair attached to this boroughs tournament. And I just think that's definitely something that could happen within Ultimate. It's not saying definitely something that could happen within Ultimate, but I think why couldn't that happen within Ultimate? All of these models, and I think using the sport as a vehicle for opportunities for people, would just be really fantastic to see. And of course, it's easy to sit here and waffle and kind of, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. But then it's actually about then going and doing it. And there's thinking not so much just from a perspective. I think we all start as players, we all have our dreams and aspirations as a player. Like, I want to make it to the top team, I want to win a European Championship, I want to play World Games, I want to do this, I want to do this. But then it could be a time to even think, especially with the times we're in now outside, with COVID, just thinking, okay, we can't really play as much as we'd like to, but what can I do? And not what can I do just for myself, but what could I do to help someone else? It's kind of trying to remove the self from the thought process and start to think of an us or a we, what else could be done. And I think the sport and the community built around the sport is so fantastic. Like, it's something to be spread, and even sometimes have the thoughts, reservations as to thinking about, if we start to get in all of these kids and kids from which neighbourhoods, areas, it could be quite, might think that the culture would be watered down if you have a bunch of kids who've come from football and rugby and all of these cultures might come into Ultimate and see self-referee, I don't respect that, what's that all about, what's this, But actually, my perspective is that the culture of Ultimate, especially the spirit of the game, because it's ingrained within the sport, the culture of Ultimate is so strong that they would be forced to assimilate within it, and be able to reap the benefits, as opposed to the culture gets watered down. And then the flip side of that is maybe before you'd go to a trial and you'd be up against for maybe for a top team trial, be up against 100 people. Now you might be up against 200, 300, 400 people, and that greatly reduces your individual chances of achieving those personal goals. So I think, oh no, don't. I've often heard people talking about, oh, I don't want the sport to become too big because most people want to keep a small. They want to keep. They're precious about this thing, like a secret that no one else knows about, and then precious about it. But if you're looking at a bigger picture aim, it would be, if like me, you're a competitor, you'd think first and foremost, oh, let those 200, 300 people come. I know I'm sick, so I'm gonna, the cream will rise to the top regardless. And the other benefits of having those other people in greatly outweighs any of the individualistic things we're just talking about. And that way, that's where I come back to. It's an us versus an I.
I think that's a great summary of everything that we've been talking about, and sort of going back to the title of It Takes a Village. We are a community. We are all together in this, and we can do so much more if we just come together and, like you said, put things aside and actually focus on what we can achieve, because it could be so much more. And a lot of times we keep on being compared to football or rugby or this or that, and what are they doing? Forget about what they're doing. What are we doing, and how can we be the best? So I think that's it from us in terms of that.
I want to jump in before we run out of time. Thank you both, Fawzia and Tatenda, for that really fascinating discussion. And I think those last points you brought up is that we're very proud of our community, and we love those elements that we have around self-refereeing and kind of the mixed elements and how it should be picked up by anybody. But there is that sense that we are somewhat gated about how you can get involved with the sport. And if nothing else for this year, it's giving a clear indication of where those gates are and how we should be opening them for everyone involved. We've got a couple of messages. One from Sarah, just said thank you so much for speaking so passionately about everything. No questions, because I think you answered everything so well. But again, anyone who's watched, thank you for joining us. Again, the donation links are all in the description box below, and also on the Iceni platforms for social media. Again, Tatenda and Fawzia, thank you so much for your time. We hope to hear more of the insight and diversity that you can bring to our community. And I hope it's given everyone on this webinar food for thought, but also food to get going and do something different for their clubs. So thank you both very much. I hope everyone on the call, thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.